Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. I'm your host, John Light, and also the president of Sabertooth. And with me today, my guest is a gentleman named Peter Saddington. And Peter, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in just a moment, but I got to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't look around you in the video and go, okay, this guy digs cars and racing and getting his hands a little dirty.
Well, you're not wrong, John, and I really appreciate you for giving me an opportunity to hang out with you on your podcast here. Absolutely. Long story short, I'm a second generation race car driver. So my father did that, and I have some amazing, wonderful memories of that. And my son also drives full time. So we're into our third generation of racing. I like to say it's a genetic disease. It's something that's in the blood. But from a professional standpoint, the long story short of it is over the last 20 years, over 2 decades, I've been a perennial entrepreneur. I built multiple startups. I've had 1 acquisition over a 9-year grind, and I've had 3 early equity buyouts. I built 3 venture funds, and I'm currently running my 3rd one, which is a $16 million venture fund that's focused specifically in deploying capital in the Bitcoin mining space and Web3 projects. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing now.
Man, okay. Well, no wonder your office is in a garage. You have to have everything close to where you can go from one job, one task to the next in a hurry.
Absolutely, brother.
All right. I got a question. And this question actually was on my mind the other day when we spoke. So your son's it's not like he's 21 and on a racing circuit somewhere, right? I think if you said he's 10.
Yes, sir.
And he's racing. What is he racing? What kind of vehicle is he on?
So currently he's racing karting. So he has a couple of go-kart chassis that I build. So we are a full privateer team, which means that everything is financed out of my back pocket. And he's in his 3rd full season of racing. Long story short, when he wanted to be a little bit more like his appa, his old man, he was pressing us for about 9 months to drive. This is when he was 6 years old, and we kept kind of blocking him and saying, you don't want to go fast. It's just something that you see your old man do. And then finally, after asking us for 9 months straight of wanting to go racing, we finally said, well, we understand this world. If we're going to be doing this, then we're going to do it hardcore. So we pulled him out of school. We homeschool him, and he's on the track 3 weekends a month. And every day after school, he's on the simulator. So we have a really nice simulator setup so he can race against other relatively professional race car sim drivers. And so that's how he gets his practice in outside of the track.
Wow. One way or another, he's going to have some great stories to tell at some point. Probably already does. I mean, to me, that's amazing. And that shows, I grew up, one of my daughters played collegiate soccer as a goalkeeper. Her mother played collegiate soccer for 4 years in the Big East up at Rutgers in the early 90s. And I know we had a lot of commitment for tournaments and everything else. What you're talking about, that's like you bought all in. And I'm betting it's not just because you know it. I'm betting because you take that approach to everything you do.
Well, you're not wrong. I believe that, and this is something that I tell my children all the time, is that be the best version of yourself all the time. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to be the best in what you do, but what I'm asking them is to bring their best self to the equation every single time. And in many cases, sometimes bringing your best will actually put you up in the upper echelons of talent and the upper echelons of success. And so I don't ever ask them to worry about the outcome of their effort. Rather, the outcome is a function of effort. And so the focus is on the effort itself. Are we willing to bring our full self to the game and put everything out on the track or the field and do our best in school, etc.? And the results should be a function of that.
Yeah, that's like that same thing, message. And we're starting off talking about children, but I'm about to accelerate this into talent and tech and whatnot. But I tell the same thing to my kids. And when I've coached youth football as well, I tell the kids really clearly, I'm not really interested if you're the biggest kid or the most athletic kid or the fastest. What I'm interested in is, do you consistently have a great attitude and put out great effort? Because if you can do those 2 things over time, the results typically take care of themselves.
Absolutely. They really do.
Now, yeah, and it's funny because to me that's a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn. And when you start dealing with where you sit, and you've got these venture funds, and you've already shown great success as an entrepreneur. You understand what it is to grind. You understand what it is to deal with disappointment, right? And I think one of the harder things you do in business is, how do I go from just being punched in the gut to being my best self, so that I'm giving 110%, whatever, for what's in front of me instead of what's behind me. But I'm really curious, when you look across the VC landscape, when people come to you and say, hey, I've got this really, really great idea, and you want to vet them, and I'm not looking for specifics or, trade secrets, so to speak, but just, do you ever vet people and look at them and wonder, man, does this person get it, that it's effort and attitude over time? And sometimes that time part of the equation, that variable can be way out there. Like you said, it could be a 7, 8, 9-year grind in some cases.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's imperative that if you're moving into the venture space, or you're building an entrepreneurial minded, or you're an entrepreneur or an operator, you want to build startups that require venture funding, or, in any type of investment from a, family office or even an institution.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to understand some core tenets. Number one, a venture fund is slated at a 10-year life cycle. Now, this is actually pretty important because it grounds the realities of what it takes, number two, to actually build something to success. And so for me, I have a really powerful rubric and a really powerful story in that my first company took 9 years to get to a point of acquisition. And that is exactly what I tell the young bloods who are coming to me for money. Is I ask them two things. I say, hey, are you willing to work 16 to 20 hour work days for 10 years straight to make this idea, your passion, a success? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you instantly within their response, whether they hesitate, whether they start mumbling, whether they haven't considered this idea, that it takes 10 years to do anything well. And the second thing is, are you willing, just like you said, are you willing to be punched in the gut? And so those two ideas is what I ask questions around resilience and perseverance. That is what it takes. I find it fascinating when I hear the younger generation complain and bemoan the fact that success in today's world is hard. And the short answer to them always is, what are you talking about? Do anything for 10 years straight, and do it with excellence. Do it with good intentions. Grow your book of business and become beyond proficient. Become a relative expert in that in 10 years. And I guarantee you, whether it's a software company, whether it's a laundromat, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's an online business, pick one. Dig 10 years in, I guarantee you'll be making enough money to support your family. And if you've done exceptionally well, maybe even enough to stock up a war chest of savings, or a big amount of money. And so, like, I find it to be poor form that the younger generation doesn't realize this. Is literally choose anything, dig in hard, dig in deep, do your best work for 10 years straight. I guarantee you'll come out quite fine.
That's actually great insight. It's Sabretooth originated in a venture studio. And part of the philosophy behind the venture studio is, everybody gets a piece. Everybody has some level of ownership, but it's with a 10-year horizon. Unless there's a liquidity event, there's a 10-year horizon to get there. And part of that's motivated by the fact it takes time, and when you look around at a lot of people, and I think a lot of people in tech, and this is something I've noticed, I grew up in a time frame, being older than you and probably older than some of the people listening. I grew up in a time frame where we went through the economic downturn, the malaise of the late 70s and early 80s. When, people complain now, well, if I go get a mortgage, it's 8.5% or whatever the number is today. Well, I remember my parents talking about 20%, 15 to 20% mortgages. So just hang on. We're not there. We're kind of heading that direction, but we're not there yet. And I just remember going through a time frame where you have a business cycle, and you can't time a business cycle in many respects. You have to endure a business cycle. You have to ride it and be what you need to be to get through it from a low point to a high point, back and so on and so forth. But I look around a lot of these people who are in tech today who weren't working, hadn't even gone to school, maybe not even high school or junior high when the .com bubble popped. They didn't see Y2K and all the frantic movement around for a big nothing burger.
Yeah.
They didn't see these other, gigantic sort of tectonic movements in the market. And now they're seeing it and I just posted something on LinkedIn the other day where there are more tech layoffs in 23 than there were in 22. And you don't hear a whole lot about it now. Earlier than 23, you heard about it every day. Now you don't. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this generation of workers, and I'm talking maybe a 15, 20-year segment in tech who haven't seen the compression or the ups and downs of business cycle like other industry sectors have. And so there's this expectation, well, we're going to have the next PayPal, or we're going to have the next, OpenAI, or we're going to have whatever it might be that comes down the pipe. And success is very rarely an instant thing or a short-term thing, at least in business, right? It's going to take time. I think 80+% of all businesses that start fail in the first 5 years.
Oh,
some ridiculously high.
I'd probably say it's even higher than that. And you're absolutely right. It needs to be communicated that there is essentially a decade required to get to some level of proficiency, to get to some level of efficiency, to get to some level of understanding, knowledge, and know-how. I mean, all of this is time in the seat. And the only way to garner that experience, to garner that knowledge ends up becoming wisdom, is you have to be into it and you have to grind it out for that long. It's so easy in today's world to start. One of the things that I communicate to my son and daughter is don't just be a starter, be a finisher. And I'd rather you start something and then take it for a couple years and become proficient and at least at proficiency, you can say, you know what? I'm proficient at this thing, whether it's a game or a sport or even a business idea. I'm proficient at this, but I don't like it. Well, now you have you can make an informed decision. You can do it if you'd like, and you could probably persevere on it and make a good income. But you now have enough knowledge and know-how where it's like, you know what? I want to move on to something great, amazing. Maybe in the future you can come and revisit this and with a newfound vigor, a newfound perspective, a newfound a market opportunity, and you can get a jump start because you already have proficiency in it. And so I tell the young bloods today, it's easy to start, but man, it's harder to finish. And be a finisher, not a starter.
I think that right there is great insight. And it's not just for someone who wants to be an entrepreneur in tech or anything else. I think it's for people in school. I think it's for people in a job. One of the things I try to impress on my own children is that if you start something, especially like in a team sport, if you don't want to play, whatever that team sport is, I understand. You wait till the season's over. If you committed to the season, if you committed to that time period, to that project, whatever it is, you finish it. And it's not to punish them, but it is to teach them the lesson that in life, perseverance counts. It counts a lot. It counts a lot in your relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And
how does this?
You don't. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you will have no good excuse at the tail end of your life when you'll say, I didn't like this, or I didn't like that, and you didn't like this, you didn't like that, or this didn't work out, and this didn't work out, or it's like, okay, so how long did you try this? Oh, I did it for 3 months, or I did well, then you don't know anything, brother. You don't know anything about that idea. And you actually, while your opinion, you might think your opinion is valid, you frankly are lacking a year, years of experiential understanding so that you could actually communicate with sophistication as to why this didn't work out, or why this wasn't important to you, or why this wasn't worth endeavoring on, why this wasn't worth persevering on. That I'll take, because there are lessons learned in that. But so many of and you could probably find stories on this on Google, Yahoo News, or anything relatively quickly, that the younger generation, they are so good at flipping jobs. They'll move from one job in 3 months to another job, and they'll hang out five months. Some of them, and I actually talk with these guys sometimes, which is I can cut through the BS so quickly with them, because these young candidates are professional interviewers, not professional workers. They're really good at getting the job because they have so much seat time interviewing. And they're so good at interviewing and getting into the game, but they can't persevere the job because they don't know how to finish. They don't know how to dig in and actually learn. And that, I think, is something that the younger generation needs to understand, is that dig into a point where you understand it. When you understand it, you'll have a valid and verifiable opinion, whether you should do it or not. But at least you'll have some context, some historicity, and some good data points as to why this thing didn't work out. So focus on finishing, not just starting.
Yeah, outstanding. Because one of the things that's starting right now, and has been for mercy a year and a half now, is the Chat GPT, the generative AI that's rolled out into the marketplace. And now you see a lot of these big companies, in a sense, trying to be everything to everybody and corner the market on the foundational LLMs, the foundation of generative AI going forward. And it feels like it doesn't leave a lot of room for the little guys, so to speak, for the startup and entrepreneur. But what I've noticed over my lifetime, referencing back to the 80s again, is that when there's a downturn or you have a bunch of layoffs like tech has experienced in the past year and a half, 2 years, it's often followed by a wave of entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity in everything that's going on in the market right now for that wave to manifest itself when people understand that they need to focus in on specifics rather than trying to be everything to everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty confident I'm never going to compete head to head with Google or LinkedIn or Apple or Microsoft or name whatever big FANG type company you want to name, right? But what I can do is wrap my hands around something that I do really, really, really well and execute it at a high level and find a way to deliver it to the market that the big players can't do because they're trying to do so many other things. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about what you're seeing about this is a great time or not just to start, but to start with the end in mind, that 8 or 9 or 10-year run. And maybe it manifests as that, maybe it doesn't, but how do you see the market right now with the changes going on and the opportunity that's presented for people who've been squeezed? To go back in the workforce or maybe to make their own workforce?
Absolutely. We are now in, so I wrote my third book about this, and I've actually created videos on in and around AI, machine learning in the future. And I was speaking specifically to the younger generation and letting them know that, let's just go back to the context of my third book. My third book is called Gravity, creating infinite opportunities. And how do you create gravity in today's world? Well, the focus of my book and the 3 main points is that we live in a mobile, video, and remote work world. And this was published in 2019. So this was pre-lockdown. This was pre, COVID and all that stuff. And so I'd like to, rub my shoulders off and brush my shoulders off and say I knew the future, but it was heightened. Everything that I had espoused in my book was heightened during lockdown. We went all mobile. We went all remote, and video is even more leveraged today than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And so in today's world of mobile, video, and remote work, we now have an opportunity. I always look at it as an opportunity. Some will say a challenge, but it's an opportunity for us to fine tune our engagement online, our content online, our narrative online, our video presence online, our optics online, everything that we do. And so I foresee, and I think this is the crux of my answer to your question, is that we now live in the most important decade from 2020 to 2030 of personal branding. And we have AI and we have machine learning systems that are constantly amalgamating, congealing, and putting together all of our data. And at the end of the day, what the internet will say about you has been curated, managed, and put together by people that aren't you. And so my call to action in my third book was that since I believe that the 2020 to 2030 is going to be the decade of personal branding in a mobile video and remote work world, it is imperative now to use the tools of today to create and establish your brand, to ensure that you are the owner, the controller of the optics and perception around who you are, right? It's not some machine system. And what people forget, what people don't often think about is the fact that you as a child, as a 18-month-old baby, already have a digital persona created by the data brokers of today in technology. And you might say, well, how is that possible? Because your mama posted your 18-month picture on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, and Twitter. So you already have a personal brand because of your mama who posted it on social media. You know what? You probably should start controlling that. Not as an 18-month-old, but you understand my point. From 18, if you were born today, 18 months ago, and the first photo is posted up now, from now to the next 18 years, your digital profile, your digital brand is being created. Mm-hmm. And so the younger generation, I believe, using machine learning, AI, and tools like this need to be tooled up, need to start taking command and control of their online narrative. And I think this is going to be, in my opinion, this is why I wrote my third book. I believe this is going to be the competitive advantage of the future. Everything that you're doing right now, John, with this podcast is ensuring that the narrative and the brand and the perception of who you are has been dictated and controlled by the content that you are willing to put time into, so that the big data brokers and all the big data is collecting this stuff. And when people Google John, or that, drowning in the tech talent pool, they're going to find you and the message that you want. And so we have so many tools, from video editors. I mean, everybody can become a photography master these days, a video master. The tools make it hard. They've lowered the barrier to entry. And so to answer your question succinctly in one sentence, it would be this. Today, we have technology that you can use to level yourself up, grow yourself into the career, the project, or the passion that you would like to follow. But it has to be controlled by you. The technology is available, and you really have no excuse for allowing big data to create a digital persona of who you are that is not accurate.
Now, there is a heck of a point, because I deal in talent. It's what I do, talent acquisition. Sabretooth is focused on the tech talent space, and are really, really buckling down with data engineers and scientists and machine learning engineers and developers and AI and so on and so forth. And I think you're really on to something important when it comes to talent per se. Is I don't think people put nearly enough effort. And effort may be a very broad term for this application, or maybe not broad enough, into curating their online professional presence.
100%.
And, LinkedIn is the big elephant in the room as far as professionals go, but there are a lot of other resources. I mean, you can have stuff sitting out on GitHub or HubSpot or whatever, demonstrating your work or publications. But even a person who's not a PhD with, 20 publications they can list on a resume, you can have a robust LinkedIn profile that not only describes where you've been and how you've gotten where you are, but helps people understand how you work.
Exactly.
And I think somebody sitting where you sit from a VC perspective, I think it's critically important that if I want to talk to what you said, one of the young bloods out there, nobody's talking to these old guys like me. I'm just like 30 pounds away from being a Santa Claus in a mall at the holidays, but with this beard going on. But I kind of sit back and go, anyone can take control of that LinkedIn profile and showcase themselves and project themselves into what they want to be. As long as they're honest, number one, you got to be legal, ethical, moral, and all that. But there's so many opportunities to upskill, to get certifications, to learn. I interviewed someone earlier this year who has an undergraduate, I think, in literature, yet she's a CISO right now. 2 decades later in her career. And it used to be, and then going back to that historicity, you said that word earlier, and I'm like, somebody else likes to use that word. I like to throw it out too, because I remember in the 80s and the 90s, and I got my undergraduate degree in accounting. And what I did is when the AICPA really started crunching down on the requirements to be a CPA, I found out within 4 or 5 years of graduating that accounting was not the life for me. And I had to move on from that, but I ended up in the headhunting business. And the rest is kind of written in history. But one thing I noticed is prior to that crackdown by the AICPA, CPAs could come and have an English degree or a history degree. It didn't really matter. You just studied, you passed a test, and you worked under a licensed CPA. and, got your requirements met that way. And I think we're in a situation in this decade, a context where, man, if you want to go learn Python, go learn it.
Yes, absolutely.
If you want to go figure out how to develop an LLM or how to develop, a machine learning model, just understand what the end is before you begin. Just don't do it because, this makes me feel warm and fizzy. But I want to actually address a problem.
Yeah, and when we have the best system out there, it's called ChatGPT-4. Now, is it perfect? No. Does it have bias? Absolutely. Does it have some censorship? Of course. Nothing's perfect. However, I will tell you, and I've told many people this, my first go-to today is not Google. My first go-to is ChatGPT-4 because I can have a conversation with them. I can ask them, hey, you can go to ChatGPT-4 right now. I can give you 3 examples right off the cuff. And you can go to ChatGPT right now and say, hey, build me a 10-part series on X, Y, and Z. Bam. It'll give you the 10 parts that you need to write content on, 10 parts you need to write video on, and it'll break it all down, right? Or you could go to them and say, hey, I want to learn Python. Where should I start? It'll say, here's the websites. Here's what you need to learn. You might say, hey, I've never built a web page before. Can you help me build my first web page? And it'll give you the actual code. So you don't need another person to help you begin your journey in starting in whatever endeavor you have. If you have a problem, if you want to fix a bicycle, you can take pictures and send it to ChatGPT and say, well, you need this hex screw. It's a 6 and not an 8. This is the type of detailed information that these technology tools can give to us. But I want to speak to something that you talked about, the boomers maybe, right? I'm in my 40s.
Okay.
So I'm, I think you're only a decade older than me or so. So you're not too far off, but
a decade.
but even for the older than me generation, the 4 decades deep generation, there are enough tools out there to begin, creating landmass around you, around who you are and what you're all about. And it's never too late to pivot in your career. Let me be intellectually honest. I'm going to share with you a small rubric that's really important to our venture fund. We tend to invest 90% of our investments are in people, men and women operators that are over 45 years old. And you might say, wait, what? Isn't the whole startup venture space supposed to be investing in 18 to 22 year olds who have a great idea? And the answer is, yeah, that's what Hollywood looks like. But I've raised 3 venture funds, a $2.5 million, a $10 million, and now I'm on a $16 million venture fund. My success in the last 2 venture funds, which allowed me to raise $16 million in one of the toughest bear markets humanly possible in 2021, 2022, it was because of my track record. And if you look at our metrics, the vast majority of our investments are people over 40 years old. And the reason is because they have life experience. They know what they're doing. They understand the base logic, the base fundamental things necessary to build a business, right? And so we have far better success with 47-year-olds than 22-year-olds. And I would far more be willing to invest in a 52-year-old, 53-year-old who's on their second wind, and says, I've been in the X business for 30 years and there's a major problem to be solved and it's called Y. And I know exactly how to solve this problem Y. It's like, I'm going to invest in you. You have 30 years of experience, as opposed to this knucklehead that graduated from university 2 years ago who assumes that I need to ensure that they eat avocado toast every day. Like, that's not important to me. What is important to me is time in the seat, sophistication, experience, and capabilities, as well as the ability to persevere and understand the problem well and solve it. And so I think it's something that most VCs aren't willing to talk about, number one, but in many cases they're ignorant of this fact, number two. But the reality is that you have far better chance of investing in a 52-year-old entrepreneur than a 22-year-old entrepreneur, just because they have 30 years of experience in that particular sector, business, or industry or market.
Well, and let me make 2 comments to that. One, it's funny because as soon as you said our average age of who we invest behind is like in their mid 40s or whatever, there's a book sitting on my bookcase on the other side behind my desk here called, there's 2 of them written by the same guy. It's called The Millionaire Mind and The Millionaire Next Door.
I've read The Millionaire Next Door.
And I don't know if you recall this little tidbit of information out of it, but most people don't earn or have a net worth of $1 million until they hit about 50.
That's right.
and we have this perception that, well, if you're going to be a billionaire, you need to hit it before you're 35 or by the time you're 29 or whatever it might be. Or if I'm not on the Forbes 30 under 30 or 40 under 40, I'm just not going to make it. And it's like talking to a high school kid, who's hitting this growth spurt and they're on the football team and they're good. Something like 0.0021% of high school athletes play at a professional level.
Right.
What makes you so special? And they got to get it through their minds that it's not their physical capabilities or talent that make them special in the course of life. It's how do they react to life experience? Do they approach it with the right attitude and the right level of effort? Are they resilient? Are they willing to stick with it, to your point earlier? And that's really what those two books covers, is that mindset that, hey, reality is it's a grind. Life takes time. And you got to approach it. I like your point earlier, is I want to be my best self. Well, what if I got, kicked in the gut? What if I got punched in the mouth by life or a setback or whatever? Well, you know what? I need to be my best self in that moment too.
Well, I'm a big Stoic reader. So I have a book up here that I'm staring at called The Daily Stoic. I'm a big fan of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, these types of Stoic philosophers. And they would tell you that the only thing that you actually have in your control is what they call your own reasoned choice. Now, what your own reasoned choice essentially in English, colloquialism would be, the only thing that you have control over is how you react. And I think they're absolutely right, is that regardless of good or bad, the only thing at the end of the day is controlling how you react and respond to that. And you can respond with maturity or you can respond with immaturity. But one thing that I want to get back to, because I do want to do service to the company that you've built and the models that you have and the services that you provide, is that in the recruiting game, in the finding great talent game, I think one of the things that I know that you can provide your talent pool and the people that you're trying to help place is help them understand how valuable their online branding, their online narrative is going to be. If I can wax poetic on this is actually from my third book, but please. I foresee a future, because I've talked with recruiters, I've talked with data analysts in the recruiting game, I've talked with machine learning experts and AI experts in the recruiting game, and this as well as I do, is that you guys are now being tooled up even beyond what you thought was possible 20 years ago or 10 years ago. You guys are being tooled up with big data, systems, algorithms and formulas that will allow you to truly amalgamate in a maybe a dystopian way, a true view of an individual. Now, we're not going to, communist China here and having social credit score, but employment history and amalgamating your social presence combined with your work history is a big data thing. And I know that there are companies that are taking all of this into account. And you might say, well, that sounds like an eerie dystopian, they know all well, baby, if you can't control it, you might as well optimize for it. And so that's the way that I look at it, that we now have an opportunity to curate, manage our own online branding. And certainly, I see a future. Let me give you 3 examples. And I wrote about this in my book. There's going to be a future where a recruiter will sit down with a candidate and say, hey, candidate, we'd love for you to join this company. However, we didn't find enough information about who you are on the internet. And there could be HIPAA considerations or, privacy considerations. Just, I'm not an expert in that. So you can forgive me for stepping on some toes there. But understand my point is that these recruiters are going to say, hey, we don't find enough information about you. I can also foresee a future where a recruiter will sit down with a candidate and say, man, I saw your videos from 14 years ago when you did that volcano experiment with baking soda. That was really cool. You were really good at those videos. You should, that actually
that actually happens.
Yeah. That actually, here's my point is they'll say, well, we loved watching you and you were really great at explaining that. We also saw some videos of you recently from 3 years ago explaining how you did this type of project. This gave us not only, number one, visual agreeableness so that we actually like you and think that you look good and you might smell good. But number 2, your communication style was relatively in sync with our culture at our company. And number 3, the way that you were able to with sophistication functionally decompose that idea was really powerful. And because of that social credibility that we saw online, we feel like you're a great candidate. This is the future. there's also going to be a future where a candidate will talk to a recruiter, and the recruiter say, we found all this data on you. We're really curious about, your time doing X, Y, and Z. And that could spur on the next conversation, the next piece of relational equity with that recruiter that could build up the point where they actually want you. And so your social credibility, your social, breadcrumbs, right? How you're creating your brand is going to be even more imperative in the future, which is why I think whether you're a 18-year-old, looking to get your first job or get out into college, or whether you're a 52-year-old and you're looking on your second wind, now is the best time to be leveraging free tools to expand your message, expand your narrative. And I'm almost certain 100% that you, John, with your company, are helping individuals do this anyway. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that future. The recruiting game is going to be using a lot of technology, but there still needs to be a human component to it as well.
Oh, no, totally agree. Totally agree. And I've made it a practice over the years, even if we can't help somebody find their next step, we're talking from the candidate side. How can we help you improve as a candidate? Right. And I still, to this day, pretty much every week, there's going to be somebody that I am not representing on a particular assignment that I'm prepping them for an interview because whoever they're working with doesn't do it. Or they say, hey, man, how do I improve my resume? And I introduce them to the STAR method, which is what Amazon used to use. I'm assuming they still do the situation, task, action, result. And I actually spend some time in investing in them and kind of paying it forward. And also telling them your resume and your LinkedIn profile, anything else you have online should all be aligned. Because you talked about, well, hey, 14 years ago, we went and we saw this YouTube video of you blowing this baking soda volcano up. And we really liked the fact that when you blew it up, the ceiling caught on fire because it shows that you have a very intense personality, or if they want to interpret it. There's that, but there's also, hey, yeah, we caught a video of you at Daytona Beach on spring break, and it wasn't that flattering, and we're not sure that it's going to represent you well in this company. I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I hired this really, really sharp candidate for one of our teams, and she's fabulous. I mean, she communicated well. She had energy. She's very, very knowledgeable, very articulate. She gets started, and some smart aleck in the bullpen goes and does a Google search, which back then I didn't do. We're going back 15 years, 12, 15 years. And turns out, and we had no idea ever, she was a fitness model and was on the cover of magazines and had photo shoots, in the gym lifting weights. And she was terribly embarrassed by it, that somebody would kind of do that. But now it's common. And a lot of the big corporations, they go look for you. Are you doing something embarrassing, something contrary to our quote unquote corporate values? I think one of the things the talent market has to acclimate to and prepare for. And I think hiring teams have to acclimate and prepare for as well.
Yes.
Is where do you draw the line between the professional and the human being? Mm-hmm. At what point do you cease to have empathy?
Right.
Or at what point do you start to have empathy? Because you could probably take a poll of a room, right? You put 100 people in it. Have you ever done anything that you would consider embarrassing? Or have you changed your position on an issue between high school, college, and adulthood?
Exactly.
There are a lot of people right now that are my age and your age that are looking at parenting children a lot differently than they thought they would before they had children.
Absolutely.
And it's not an indictment. It's not like they were wrong necessarily. They just didn't have that life experience to buttress that. So I think as a hiring team, hiring executives, we need to take people where they're at.
Yes.
And yeah, we need to consider their current context, and we consider their history, just like we consider their performance. But I'm not going to sit there and look at somebody and say, well, you didn't have the right degree or you did something embarrassing, because you're a different person a decade later, 5 years later, whatever.
Right.
And we need to be able to dig into it. And that's the human element.
Yes.
That's the part that today, and at least in the near term future, AI can't replace. But what AI can do, I think, is help you stack the deck in your favor. And
yes,
think of it. When I see AI in the recruiting game, in the talent business, I think about steroids. because what everybody is doing is they're taking existing practices and processes, putting AI into it and accelerating, creating the capacity for more work, but they're not improving the process necessarily on a qualitative basis. I think it's more of a quantitative thing, which is fine. But at some point, and I think I shared this with you previously, Peter, and I don't want to give the farm away. I mean, we're working on tech and at Sabretooth that we're working to address the process, qualitative perspective, in a way that stacks the deck in the favor of a quality hire. And I think the other aspect of this that the market has to be prepared for and talent has to be prepared for is very important. I think we're going to get a lot more fractured and specialized.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea of fractional work is going to be a career path for a lot of people from early on. But to get there, to be effective fractionally, you first, to your point, you need to go through the grind and become an expert, a bona fide expert in a specific application, which actually kind of takes me to another question I have for you from a VC perspective. When you look at an idea, how much specificity do you look for? And I'm not talking specificity in the sense of, what are your brand colors going to be or something like that? What's your swag? And I don't care about any of that stuff, but specifically, what problem are you solving for and why is it important?
Well, I always like to say that the best ideas stem from imminent need, because it's the imminent need that in so many ways will drive the determination and perseverance to actually build that thing to completion. And so this might not be a perfect rubric, but I believe it saved me millions of dollars and millions of dollars of invested capital that I'm responsible for from my investors and my LP, my limited partners, which is simply this. If I can't connect a imminent need that the operator or entrepreneur has to the actual problem that they're portraying to me, then I won't invest in it because there's not enough skin in the game, right? Like if let me tell you I don't mind telling, this is, I've told this so many times to investors. This is my perfect rubric. It's 5 points. Number one, you're 47 years old. You've spent over 20 years number two, you've spent over 20 years in that particular market, industry, or market demographic. Number three, there is a distinct problem within the 20 years that you have worked in that industry that you can functionally decompose, communicate with sophistication, and tell me how your solution is different from the current existing solution. Number four, you can communicate to me a perseverance level of over those 20 years of that industry. Were you a business analyst for 20 years, or did you start as a business analyst, then you moved to management, then you moved to DevOps, and then you moved to sales because they needed you there, and then you moved to marketing, and then you finished out with an executive VP. And do you have a history of the entire breadth of that particular market or industry? And fifth, and I think this is most important, are you a great storyteller? You see, I'm not in.
Okay, I wasn't expecting the fifth point.
The fifth point is
interesting.
The fifth point is my most human point. And I think you can see from my communication with you, I am a storyteller. I know what it takes to communicate effectively across the veil to be able to engage the other individual in an emotional context. Car salesmen understand this. If the car salesman can get the individual in an emotional context, then they make an emotional purchase, right? And if you're pitching to VCs, you got to tell me a good story. You got to be able to tell me the details of it. You got to get my heartstrings involved, right? That's a kind of a little juicy secret there, but that's what I get hooked on, right? Do you have all the requisite necessary requirements of historicity, experience, expertise, and capability? But also, are you great at telling a story as to why this is important to not only yourself, the market, and obviously the investors as a whole? And so those 5 things are my core rubric. If you're a 47-year-old, 20 years deep, had latitude of experience in a company, and you can tell me a great story about a very distinct problem that hurts you, then I am going to be much more greased in terms of the wheels of wanting to invest in you, because you have everything necessary to, in my mind, in this rubric, to become successful.
Yeah. Okay. That's golden. And by the way, I know we're recording this, but I wrote it down too. I didn't expect point number 5 though. And I it's funny because I tell people when I prep them for resumes, the number one thing going in is and it always surprises people, I think, at least mildly. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Don't put up a facade, and be prepared that if somebody is curious about an accomplishment or context, a situation, whatever, tell the story, but be pithy, but tell the story, and, and have fun and be yourself, because you want to kind of reveal that. And I think storytelling does that.
Yeah, brother, you took the words out of my mouth.
Gives you a chance. Yeah. It showcases you, but at the same time, it showcases who you are.
Absolutely.
And I like, here's the core reason why I think you're always going to need the human connection in talent acquisition, is that every talent acquisition decision, almost without exception, once you get into, experienced ranks, maybe not entry level where you can automate stuff because you got so many of the same skill sets coming out of a college or university, but for everything else, is an emotional decision that we try to buttress by looking at the resume, saying they answered interview questions well, they've been published or whatever it might be. And as such, in order for me to hire you or you to hire me, I have to have some level of emotional investment. I believe my decision is this is the right person.
Exactly.
And as a candidate, I believe my decision is this is the right company, organization that I align with. It's for me. Usually you make that decision first. Then we try to support and justify it. And when you get those things aligned and they integrate, they interface well, things can be wonderful. But if you ever put a facade, if you ever fake it, so to speak, you end up running into a really bumpy road that'll throw you off the saddle.
And because I'm actually listening to what you're saying, I feel like you're actually telling me some of the secret sauce behind the product and service that you're building, and you're amalgamating, you're congealing these types of aesthetic nuances that actually have a lot of value in the entire recruiting and hiring and talent acquisition process, which you're an expert. I'm not on, but I can read between the lines pretty well. I'm good at listening to people. So I think you're telling us that you have some secret sauce or some secret juju in what you're building that is adding in the human element, which is so imperative and so important.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, you're never, like I said, you're always going to need people involved in the talent acquisition process. The question is where and doing what and how. That's an open question, but I can tell you this, there's a fantastic study, and look, you've hired and sourced talent over and over again, and you've put your money where your mouth is on that talent, right? When you put money behind somebody,
yes,
you're investing in an idea, but you're investing in that team, that individual or that team that's going to drive the bus. And I would tell you this, there's this really great study. You can check out the website. You kind of got to dig for where he has it. It's leadershipiq.com, I think is the name of the website. But this fellow did a study where he tracked 20,000 new hires across a 3-year period, hundreds of companies, hundreds of hiring managers. End results, and this is across multiple functions and industry sectors and whatnot. End results were this: 19% were considered successful hires. 19%. The rest were kind of split almost evenly between people who left or terminated, or people who were on the job, performing the job, maybe up to kind of minimum standards, but nothing more. And if the hiring team could go back and make a different decision, they likely would.
Understood.
But that number has just fermented in my head for years now, 19%, because a company that can crack the code and turn that 19% to 38% just conquered the world.
Oh, no doubt. But it does fall within the Pareto principle and the Pareto distribution quite well, the 80-20 rule. So it actually makes a lot of pragmatic sense.
Yeah. That's hard to fight with, but at the same time, any incremental improvement, any incremental improvement is a winner.
If you came to me and you told me that statistically your product, your service, your system can functionally and with accuracy and precision within a standard deviation of 1, be able to beat the Pareto distribution by 2%, I would invest in your idea, right? If you were So if you were to say, hey, I can beat the Pareto distribution by a standard deviation of 1 by 2.7%, almost 3%, I'd look at you and say, well, I know that math really well. So if you can tell me that that's possible, then that 3% is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Because that's a leg up between anyone else. Right?
But what's crazy is it only takes, if you have 1 million companies and
if you do
20,000 of them,
you do 3% better than most companies, you're going to be taking the mass of scale there. So yeah.
But I'm saying if 20% of a million companies, so let's just say, let's keep it real simple. Let's just say that 200,000 out of 1 million companies can go from 19%, and let's be bold. Let's say they can get to 25%. People considered successful hires. You're still, in my mind, within the balance, the Pareto principle, because you have that other 80% of companies that are languishing at 19% or even lower.
Well, if you move away from a logarithmic metric and you move to an exponential metric, then that what you could actually, I think, within rationale, be able to say that we have an order of magnitude greater success than everyone else because of this, 6% differential. So,
well, I mean, if you just stack the deck in your favor for a successful hire every time, has a huge impact over time. But I will tell you this. You look at external recruiters and all the contingent recruiters offer some sort of replacement or refund guarantee. You could even get replacement guarantees within parameters from retained search firms. And on our retention business, which is that mid-level business where we do charge a retainer, because I don't like working for free 80% of the time. There's a Pareto principle again on the contingent side. When you look at that, we offer a replacement guarantee as well in that time period. But here's the thought process behind it, that being a limited time frame, is there is no control by our organization on what the work environment culture is like, if the company's succeeding or failing. I mean, there's just so much out of your control, and you can't hedge or ensure that the company is going to continue on, or that some other life event happens in the market or to an individual to guarantee it. So it's a hard thing to do. And I'll tell you, Peter, something that has my antenna up, that catches my attention, and I don't know that it's a problem to be solved rather than a problem to be navigated, is AI, the advent of AI, the availability of it spreading its tentacles everywhere in the marketplace, is going to commoditize a lot of stuff, a lot of processes, a lot of skills. I don't think it'll ever commoditize certain things. I don't think it'll commoditize what I'm doing. I don't think it'll commoditize what you're doing, because a lot of your decisions, when you invest behind someone, you've got your rubric and you probably got numbers you look at and, okay, is this real from a financial perspective? But you also sit back and go, do I know, like, trust this person? Is this a person who they have a demonstrated history of perseverance, resilience, resourcefulness, innovation, experience, to all the things we've been talking about earlier? And I just wonder sometimes, at what point do we get commoditized to a space where we just get more and more and more and more specialized and specific until that's all we are?
I think we will get more specialized. I think technology has a great way of creating generalized capabilities for individuals, augmenting your capabilities for even more depth and more sophistication. But you're never going to, the one thing that AI cannot do as it stands right now is AI doesn't have creativity. AI doesn't have innovation.
Exactly.
And that requires a spark of consciousness. So until we get AI to have consciousness, AI is merely an augmentation of a large language data models and large language data sets that I can leverage as a tool in my multiplicity of tool belts and tools that I have in my proverbial belt here. But at the end of the day, we will never be unnecessary. We will always be required. The human element is always going to be required. And maybe that's me trying to think positive towards the future as a technologist. And maybe there's some self-interest within that color commentary there. but I have to believe that at the end of the day, flesh and blood. We are humans who connect to other humans with flesh and blood. And at the end of the day, that's how real work is done.
No, totally agree. And let me ask you this, because I know we're about to have to wrap up, and you can hear my 9.7 pounds of fury, my little dog in here barking. Hey, he's a noble beast. He takes protecting the house and my office seriously.
I love it.
But talk to me for a second. And I think this is important because I think it tells us a lot about people, right? Help us understand, when you look in the mirror, you get up in the morning or you go to engage with your kids or with, a potential VC partner or anyone else. What are you passionate about, Peter? What's the project or the cause or the purpose that you want to grasp onto every day and make a difference in your life and the lives of people around you?
Thanks for asking. I have sticky notes all over my desk here. And there's a sticky note right here that has been up there for 11 and a half, almost 12 years now. And it states, I want to be fuel for humans. And that is my passion. My passion is that, I'll give you a little bit of context. My life started out as an orphan. So I started out in an orphanage, right? I had no future, I had no future prospects. Right, I most likely should have aged out of the orphanage at 18 years old, but I was adopted by some amazing parents who are just completely salt of the earth. They live out of Austin, Texas. My father is in his mid-70s, and he works at a hospital, and he makes $12.75 an hour. So this is how salt of the earth my upbringing was. And so for me, starting out my life out as an orphan, being adopted into a family that didn't have lots of means and ways, couldn't give me a trust fund or anything like that. And for me to grow up, learn English, to go back to Korea, learn Korean, go back to Japan, learn Japanese. I lived there for 4 years, to earn 3 graduate degrees in the social sciences, to publish 3 books, to have acquisitions and worldly success and all of that. If I and this might seem weird to say, but if an orphan like me could succeed in America through hard work, right, through the sweat of my brow, through digging in and being a finisher, not just a starter, then anybody can do it. And you might say, well, Peter, I had tougher upbringing. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Trust me. Trust me. It sucks in America to be poor, and let's say a poor colored person. It is worse in America to be a poor Caucasian person. And I won't go farther than that, but to be a poor white person in America, you have 0 handouts. You have 0 help from society at large. You are the trash of the trash. And I know that world. I came from that world. And so I know that if someone like me could achieve what I've achieved, then anyone can achieve that with a positive outlook, hard work ethic, positive thinking, not just positive thinking alone, but grabbing yourself up by your bootstraps, being able to manifest a reality, manifest a world that you desire and that you want to work for. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And so when I wrote this down 12 years ago, I want to be fuel for humans. That's when I really got serious about doing podcasts and creating content, because I've been successful. I've been so blessed through my discipline and hard work that I want to share, like I'm sharing with you for this hour here, sharing a little bit of my story, hopefully encouraging people in their journey, in their life journey, and being fuel for them. So if I could help someone, if the least thing that I could do from your podcast is help someone feel good about their work today and maybe want to try something new today, brother, I've done the universe a good service. So that's where I'm in my life, in my mid 40s now, is I want to be fuel for humans. I want to help other people succeed. Obviously I want to build my own stuff, but I want to be encouraging, and I want to leave love and care and all of that in my wake when I'm long and dead.
Awesome, Peter. Man, I'm indebted. Thank you for joining us very much. And by the way, side note, my dad was adopted at 12, and my second son is also adopted. And knowing where he came from and where my dad came from, it can be really rough, because you don't know what, as a child, you don't have the sense for it, what you're going to get and where it's going to go. And there's a lot of intrepidity, and it's a challenge. So I think it's a fantastic story. I think it's a really great story.
Well, thank you, John.
And if you're in Texas visiting folks in Austin, don't forget, I'm not far away and outside of Houston. Might have to compare notes face to face at some point.
Well, let's do it. Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate. And if I could say one final thing, if you have adopted, your children, you understand it. Let's just say if you're of the faith, then you're doubly blessed. So you've been adopted, and so your son, and this is the way that I look at it, is I've been adopted twice. Once by my Heavenly Father.
There you go.
And once by my adoptive parents here. So I have all the means necessary to live a successful life. And I think you believe that too.
Oh, absolutely. And let's just keep the good message up, though, to everyone listening too, that attitude, how you perceive things, how you choose to react, effort over time. And that's from a professional standpoint. It's pretty much everything. You can learn the rest.
Absolutely.
Peter Saddington, thanks so much, man. You and I are going to be talking again. Take care, brother.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabretooth. Sabretooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.